So my name is Christelle Rabiel. For those of you who don't know me, I am the Genesys assistant at the Crop Trust. And this is the Genesys webinar series on passport data preparation, part 1. We will have many parts because it is almost impossible to cover everything related to passport data preparation in only 1 hour or so. That's why we are splitting these demonstrations up into many parts. Welcome again. This is to give you an idea about who is participating in this webinar. So we had sent out a registration form and we have more than 100 registrants from around 41 countries, coming from 60 different institutes that conserve plant genetic resources. In this registration form, we asked you about which language do you use Excel in, because this webinar series is tailored for the people who use Excel in order to handle passport data. If you use a database, you will probably not be needing a lot of the things we will be covering in this series. But if you use data, passport data, or any other type of data through Excel spreadsheets, then you would find this, what we will cover, interesting for you. But here's the problem with Excel, and that's the reason why we asked you, which language do you use the software in? A lot of the functions that we will be demonstrating differ if you use Excel in different languages. We will see how we will handle that in this demonstration. But just to give you an example, one of the basic sums in Excel, functions in Excel, sum, for example, in English. If you use Excel in French, it would be somme, in Spanish, soma. So that's why we would be doing this demonstration, keeping this in mind. So the workflow of this webinar, we will first start with data cleaning. So on the left side, you will see that you have an example of a column that is taxonomy. The text is in different formats, capitalized or lowercase. The rows are in different sizes. So data cleaning is involved in cleaning the formatting and basically making your data legible. The second step, we would, after cleaning the data, we would standardize it to conform to the data standard that we use in Genesys, that is called the MCPD, in its latest version, version 2.1. So after cleaning the data, you see here you have the taxonomy column. If we wanted to conform to the data standard of MCPD, it would have to be split up into 2 different columns, the genus alone and the species alone. And we would have to name these columns in a specific way. So all caps and genus, species. Then after standardizing the data, if hopefully we have time today, but if not, we can cover this later, we will go into data validation. So you see that we standardized the data, we cleaned it up, but you see here that there are some misspellings, some errors. Data validation will take care of that. And we will show you the tools that we have developed in Genesys that can help you do this data validation. So more specifically, the table of contents, more specifically when it comes to data cleaning, we will show you how you can unhide columns, basically finding all the hidden data in your Excel file by unhiding columns, by adjusting row sizes, by finding if there is data in cells that are far away that you can't see, by reviewing some data that might be hidden in notes or comments, and by finding invisible data that might have been recolored. Then, also part of data cleaning, we will show you some tools that you can use to make your data more legible. For example, clearing formats, creating a table, erasing spaces if they are leading or trailing spaces, changing cases, uppercase, lowercase for case-sensitive data such as taxonomy, and disconnecting data from functions so that they don't show up as errors. Then, as part of standardizing data into the data format of MCPD, we will show you how you can transform the columns into MCPD descriptors. For example, how to split one column into many, or how to merge many columns into one, depending on the requirements of MCPD standard. Then we will show you how you can map or transform your labels and your values that are supposed to be codes according to the MCPD standards. So we will prepare together some useful tables that you can keep and save, then use later on for all of your mapping endeavors to MCPD. So after data standardization, we will also look at standardizing other data formats other than the coded values, for example, dates, institute codes, country names, etc. And after this, we would delve into some data validation, for example, correcting taxonomy misspellings, checking for duplicated accession numbers or for duplicated rows, potentially auto-completing taxonomy, and potentially validating geocoordinates using the Genesys validator tool. So, because we already mentioned that the functions in Excel depend a lot on which version of Excel you are using, for example, which language you are using Excel in. What you will see on the screen during the demonstration, during all the webinar series, is first of all, the main working area in Excel. And then on the right-hand side, you will see a translator of functions. So this translator, I will show you what the function I am using on the spot in English and translate it into your version of Excel, whether it's in Spanish or in French. And also, because we are doing a practical hands-on demonstration, I will enable the keyboard, so you will see it on the screen, just so that you can see what shortcuts I am using on my keyboard, so what I'm typing. Now I will stop sharing my screen for a moment, and then we will begin the demonstration. Just please wait with us a few moments. So what we are looking at is the data sample that we are going to be using for the rest of the series. You see it looks in a shape that's not very legible. You see here that there are some rows that are hidden and also columns that are very small. You see obviously all the different formats and typography that is being used. You see here that there are some notes about the data here and here. So we will start by systematically cleaning this data following different steps. First of all, we see here that the columns are skipping from C to F. So in this case, you might start working on your data without noticing that. So it's recommended that before you begin your data cleaning, or before you begin working with your data actually, to select all. So I clicked on the keyboard Control A. You might be able to see it here. Control A, that's to select all. Right click and unhide. Or you can also select those columns that are being skipped and click unhide. So you see that the columns have expanded to include D, E, and F. So selecting all the columns, right-click, unhide would do this job. First of all, that's what we did. So we unhided columns that are there, and that's the acquisition date and the collecting source. But you can't really read right now the collecting, the header collecting what. You have to read it from here. So you select all your columns in order to adjust the size. And what you could do is to select between two columns. Just hover over that. Between two columns, you will see this symbol, the line with two arrows, and you double click on it. And this would automatically adjust all your column sizes in order to make all the data in them legible. We only did that for the columns. If you want to do this for the rows, then you select all your rows as well. But instead of selecting manually, what you could do, and I want you now to look at the keyboard for the shortcut. You can Control A, or you can select a row, one row only, and then Command Shift down. I'll do it again. Select one row, Command Shift down, and this selected all the rows that have data in them. Then you hover over between two of the rows so that you get the symbol line and two arrows, and you double click. So this adjusted the row sizes to make all the data legible within those rows. So now we are already starting to see how our data is taking shape. Now, in some cases, you have maybe 1,000 or 2,000 rows. In some cases, you might have data that is a data table or any data points that are not visible. For example, here we discovered that there's a whole table, many columns after our visible data that we can't spot unless we zoom out. But instead of zooming out, Excel has a little tool that can allow you to go to the last cell, the very last cell in your sheet automatically. And you can see it here in the ribbon, in the home ribbon, find and select. If you click on the little arrow and find and select, sorry, I will move the keyboard a little bit. You will go to special. So you have a list of items that Excel can automatically jump to or select without you having to manually go there or select it. So you see one of them is called last cell. You click on it and you click OK. And Excel took us automatically to the very last cell that it found data in this sheet. So what do I do with this data? For the moment, for the time being, I'm just going to cut it and put it on another sheet and then go through it later. So I will make the keyboard visible again. And notice on my keyboard, the shortcut that I'm using. If you are on Mac, it's called Command X. If you are on Windows, it's called Control X. So I'm cutting this data. I am adding a new sheet and then Control V to paste. I go back and my data is gone. So I go back to my original table, the one that I'm working on. And I notice that there are some notes for certain cells right? But maybe if you have 1,000 rows, you will not be able to see, you will not be able to hover over and scroll every cell to check if there's a note inside it or not. And a lot of times, if you are working with different people in a team, the document will go back and forth, the data will be checked by many people, and they might have notes, for example, about this accession here, that has the species not identified, and someone says, okay, we looked at it, it's actually Oryza sativa. So what do you do? This data now is in a note, and there might be many different notes in the file. So what you can do is to make all these notes visible at the same time to know where they are. You can go to the review ribbon. So we have home, and if you move to the review ribbon, there's a notes button. And then if you click on this arrow, you can show all notes. So all these notes that are now shown, you don't have to hover over all of them in order to make them visible. They're all shown. And if you want to hide them back at the same time, all of them, you click on the same, you go to the same place. So you click on review, notes, little arrow, you untick show notes. Now I'll show them again, and I will adjust the data based on what's in the notes. So this is actually, I will change the species name according to the note. I'll keep it open. And there's another one here. I can move it. It's pointing to this status in the MLS. It's saying not sure about it. Maybe it's better to keep it blank. And so I delete and I keep it blank based on this request. You can also convert the notes to comments. So if you want to reply to this and say, no, that's not true, you can convert all your notes to comments using the same place. So review, notes, convert to comments. Convert all notes. So now you can reply, and then you can start a whole thread. But you can also resolve it or delete it. So now I adjusted my data based on the notes, and I removed them. So in some cases, we noticed that some of the data might come in another color that is invisible, maybe made white. It could happen. So for example, if you click here, you might have the instinct to just delete this column entirely because it's blank. But if you click, actually, you will see that there's data in there. You see here, there's data. How can you find these instances if they're not really visible? So we're going to go back to the home ribbon. Sorry, if you click on it twice, it disappears. So if you go to the home ribbon, we're going to go back to go to special. Blanks. So we're asking Excel to select, in this case, all the blank cells, all the blank cells. So everything that has data in it, whether it's visible or not, is not going to be selected. And I click OK. And I noticed that Excel selected this, which is blank because I just deleted the data that's in it, and the rest of my sheet, but it didn't select this column here. So what I would do in this case is that I would select this column and I would just change the color. And now I see that I made visible the collecting institute code. Right. So we finished the first part. the very first part, finding hidden data. We still haven't gone into formatting and all the rest. So I will check the chat box if there are any questions, if you've tried to do some of these steps right now. I will proceed with making the data legible. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get rid of all these different typographies, Comic Sans, Text New Romans. I want to standardize all of that. So I select all my data, Control A. And in the home ribbon, you might find this icon. If you hover over it, it says clear, but don't click it. Click on the arrow that's next to it. And you want to clear only the formats. So if you click on clear all, you just deleted all your data. If you click on clear contents, it also almost does the same. But you want to clear, you can also clear links if there are any embedded links in a text that you want to get rid of. But here we just are interested in clearing the formats so that all of our data is more legible and is using the same font. So now that I've done this, you see we're getting closer and closer to our final outcome. Now I want to create an Excel table. So what is an Excel table? So right now we have our columns and our data and our rows independent from each other. What an Excel table is that it gathers all of these columns and rows into one data set in a table. So in order to do that, I can either, so the shortcut to do it is Control A, so selecting everything, and then Control T. But you can also select all of your data by pressing Control A, and then going to the Insert ribbon, and here Insert Table. There are different types of tables in Excel. There's a pivot table. We just use right now a regular table. So this is prompting you to define the range of your table. So right now it detected automatically that it goes from A1, so this cell A1, to M16 all the way at the end. You can change that by clicking on this button over here and reselecting. That's how you change the range. But I want the range to be exactly my data. And if your data has column names, then please make sure that this button is ticked. If your data doesn't have any column names, then untick this column. But right now, my columns do have names, for example, taxonomy, accession number. So I keep this button ticked. I click OK. And this creates an Excel table with its own formats. So you see the color and the fonts are defined by Excel. So how do you change that? And how do you name your table? How do you edit some aspects of it? This all happens when you are clicking anywhere inside the table. You would be automatically redirected to the table ribbon. Or if not, if you're clicking outside and back in, you see. If not, you can always click anywhere inside the table and find this ribbon and click on it. That's how you would access all these different formats. And you can even rename your table. For example, batch 1. So that's the name of my table that I can use in functions later on. We already have a question in the chat. So when you clear format for all the data that affects the date format, how do you deal with that? Yeah, we will be checking date formats and formatting at later on in our webinar series, hopefully today if we have time. But the date for specifically dates in Excel are very sensitive and have kind of a special case. We will be addressing that later on. Sometimes your, for example, taxonomy is merged into one column. The best way to go about it if you want to clean the data and validate it using the Genesys tool is to split it up into two. So to have the genus apart and to have the species in another, sorry, in another column. So in order to do that, it's better to keep your original taxonomy column, and then I will show you how you can, split up genus and species while keeping your original taxonomy column. So now that we created an Excel table, we want to add a column in it, or two actually. So the way you add column in an Excel table, you right click on any header, insert table column to the left, insert another one. And I will call this column genus, and the next one species. And there are many ways to do this, to split one column into two. But what we would use right now is a function in the data ribbon called text to columns. So I want to keep my original taxonomy column. So I want to copy this. So I click on the first one, then Command Shift down to select all the column, and I copy it. Or I can also copy and then paste the whole column. And then I select the data that is in the genus. And I click on the data ribbon, text to columns. When you click on this number, this tool prompts you to say if your data is delimited. What it means is that if it's separated by a space or a comma, or if you want to split up the column based on a fixed number of characters. For example, every 3 characters to split into another column. In this case, our data, we want to split it according to the space in the middle. So we use delimited. And we specify that the delimiter, what is separating my 2 columns, is a space. So you already see here that Excel draws a line and tells you where it's going to be splitting the column up. Your data might be split by a comma or maybe a semicolon. You can specify here. So if I click on space, next. Here Excel is prompting you to select every one of those columns and specify the data type or the data format. Is it a text? Is it a date? Is it general? If it's a date, what's the date format? And you could go into advanced, but for now we will keep it in general because we will be covering data formats later on. And you click finish. So you see that now you have your genus and species separated. Sometimes you might encounter this, that inside your cell, so you have the genus name, sometimes you have spaces at the end that you can't see, or spaces in the beginning. For example, here. So you wouldn't want to erase them manually, obviously. And also at the same time, you don't want to change the capitalization of your text manually. So you don't want to remove this part of the text and then type it in lowercase manually, right? And you also probably don't want to write manually in a lowercase the species names. This is important. So these spacing issues, the hidden trailing spaces and the capitalization is important in order to enable you to use the Genesys validator tool later on. So also, it's good to have the genus and species name as they are technically supposed to be capitalized. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you two functions that you can use together at the same time in order to both remove the spaces and capitalize your genus and species names properly. So for that, I will right-click and add a table column. So this would be called genus original, because that's the original one. I want to keep it. It's always good to have copies of your original data, but the final one to be titled as the final title. So this would be our final genus column, because that's what we still have left to do in the sample. We still have to remove the spaces and adjust the capitalization. So I want to show you the two functions separately, and then we will combine them together to do it once. So when it comes to capitalization, Excel has three different functions for the same purpose. The first one is called, so if you see here, I am typing in the functions bar equals proper. So this allows you to transform any text from different cases to only the first character being uppercase and the rest of the words being lowercase. So if you click on proper, then you open the parentheses and click on this cell here, D2, and then you close the parentheses and you click enter. You see here that automatically all of your genus names are now transformed into first character capital, and then the rest of the word is in lowercase. But this keeps the spaces. So I will show you the other function that can erase the spaces. So I will delete. And again, if you want to use the function, you press on equals, and then I want to write trim, T-R-I-M. You open the parentheses, click on the cell G2, and close the parentheses, and then click enter. Because you are working in an Excel table, Excel automatically continues the function all over the column so that your table is consistent. That's why you are seeing it completed. So you see here that the spaces have disappeared, but our capitalization is still the same. So we want to use a combination of functions. You can click after the equals. So I will do it all over again. So I will put equals, trim, parentheses, and then I want to embed the other function inside the trim function. So trim and then proper, open the parentheses, click on this cell, and then close the parentheses twice. So make sure now to close the parentheses 2 times because you have two functions embedded within each other. And then click enter. And then all of your column now has the genus name without spaces in the beginning or the end and in capitalized names. So I will do quickly the same for the species name, but I will use, inside the trim function, I will use another one to make all the species name in lowercase. And that's exactly called lower. So insert table column to the left. This is my species original. Again, I want to click on equals, trim, parentheses, lower, because I want everything to be lowercase. Another parentheses, you click on the cell F2 and close the parentheses twice, 1, 2, and then click enter. And you have now all of your species names without spaces and all in lowercase. And this is my species column. Now, for the people who joined us, who use Excel in French or Spanish, I will be translating here the functions. So from English to French, lower is minuscule, proper is non propre, and trim is this, supraspace. In Spanish, lower is minusc, proper is non proprio, and trim is espacios. So after the webinar, I will send you a documentation that can show you how you can add this functions translator into your Excel. And it would be especially useful if you are not able to find any support articles in the Excel forums, specifically to the Excel version of your language. There are also dictionaries made by Microsoft to translate or to give the translations from English to the version you are using of Excel, but they are more in a list format, like a list. Actually, we have it here. You can start typing. And you have kind of a dictionary in the language that you selected to translate. This will be sent to you alongside the documentation on how you can enable this. If you have any questions so far, please put them in the chat. I will wait just a little bit before proceeding to the third part. And now let's say that I have my genus, a final genus and final species columns. I'm happy with how they look, not happy with the data inside. Maybe there's some mistakes, but I can work with them. And I want to delete my original columns. It might happen that you have a function somewhere and you delete the original column that this function here is referring to. Because when you click here on the species names in the final column, it doesn't show you in the functions ribbon the text. It's still showing the function. What this means is that when you select this original column and delete it, your genus final column is going to show as an error or a reference message. It's telling you that the function is referring to a cell that doesn't exist anymore. And now they all disappeared. So I will revert back, Control Z. And a very easy way to solve this problem is to disconnect your functions from the original data. So you want these to show as text, not as function anymore here. So what you can do is that you can select all of this column, or maybe you just want to select the cell, the individual cells. So you click on the first one, Command Shift down to select all of these entries. You copy. So again, I selected the first cell, Command Shift down, Control C to copy. And then I want to paste them as values. So here in the home ribbon, while you are still so we just copied those cells and we're not doing anything else. We're not clicking escape or close. We're just staying with the selection. We go to the home ribbon and we don't press on the main paste button. We press on the arrow, always press on the arrow. And if you scroll below, you will see that you can have the option of pasting the values. So in this paste, you can paste while keeping the source formatting, or while only pasting, values without any formatting, without any functions, just the values as we see them. Or maybe you want to paste values and with the formatting also, but we recommend that you paste values only. And now you see if you click on all the entries of your genus name, they are disconnected from the function. So we'll repeat it again with the species names. You see here, if I'm clicking on the species names, I can still see the functions. So I want to disconnect them. I click on the first cell, Command Shift down, copy, so Control C. And then in the home button, paste arrow, paste values, and now they are disconnected. And if I want to delete my columns, now those won't be affected. So I deleted, and I can still see the values here. But what I usually do is that I always prefer to keep the original. So we will see later on how we can validate the spelling. And you see here the dates also, how we can reformat. That would be at a later step. But what we managed to do right now is that we were able to find hidden data and make data legible. So by changing the formatting, by changing the capitalization, by removing unnecessary spaces, by adjusting row sizes and column sizes, we also were able to find some data that was hidden, zoomed out all the way at the end of the sheet. We were able to review notes and turn them into comments or resolve them. We were able to find this column that was collecting source that was hidden all in white. So this would wrap up what we can cover today when it comes to data cleaning. There's obviously, of course, more tools and more functions and more things to cover, but we will keep it just like for that. We will just narrow it down to that when it comes to data cleaning today. I am not sure if the time allows, because we started late, we are going to go a bit over time. And we would start with some data standardization, but we might not be able to cover everything all the way down to validation today. So that could be left to the next part of the webinar series. So when it comes to data standardization, we saw already how with the taxonomy column, because according to the MCPD standard, it's better to have the taxonomy split into genus name and species name. That's the descriptors of the MCPD. They don't have a descriptor for taxonomy. For all of the scientific name, it is split up into genus, species, species authority, subtaxon, etc. So one of the tools to standardize to MCPD that you can use is this tool of splitting one column into two or more. Another tool that you might need to use is to merge two columns into one, because also that's the MCPD standard, that's the requirement. So, for example, here, okay, I will select my columns again and double click to expand them. So for example, here, you can see that you have the header called site of safety duplicates 1 and site of safety duplicates 2. In the MCPD standard, this should be all of the sites of safety duplicates should be in one column, and if you have many, they should be separated by a semicolon. So I will insert a new column in this table, and I will call it, for now, I will call it site of safety duplicates all, right? And this is where I want my data to all be aggregated together when it comes to this descriptor. So one way to do that is, again, we're going to use not really a function, but we will use the function bar. It's the same for all languages. It doesn't have any specific name. So equals, you click on the first cell. So you are saying basically that this new cell is equals whatever is here. Then you click on and then because in the MCPD standard, many values are separated by a semicolon, not space or the word and, I want to add a semicolon between the two. So I clicked on equals, I selected this cell, I pressed and, then I want to open the text brackets here, type in a semicolon, and then close the text brackets. This will show up as only semicolon. And then I will press and press here, the second cell that I want to aggregate together. And I press enter. So now it's just to show you an illustration of how you can merge two different columns into one. You can use this for different descriptors and even different types of data. That is basically just to show you how you can do that. Our final site of safety duplicates column is not going to be this IITA semicolon Svalbard, because according to the MCPD standards, they should be the views codes of the GeneBank of IITA and the views codes of Svalbard. So this is kind of our segue into the next step, which is mapping to MCPD, either the column headers or the coded values. So I will delete this column for that purpose. And I think for today, we will only be able to cover how you can map your column headers to MCPD. And in the next, but it would be basically using the same functions for the rest of the data that is coded. So I will demonstrate right now only the column headers, and then in the next part, we can move on with the rest of the steps. So now I will jump out of Excel for a little bit, right? And I'm going to the MCPD PDF. I will actually paste the link in the chat for those who don't have access to it yet. Just give me one moment. And also the standard is available in different languages. So it is available in French, in Spanish, and in other languages. The link that I will be sending you right now is for the English one. And if you would like to have access to the to other languages, then please send us an email, or you can also find it on the website of the CIAT or the CGIR website. So I'm pasting the link in the chat. So this is the gold standard right now for passport data, and this is the one that we use in Genesys in its latest version. You are seeing here on the screen the PDF of it, and it has all the details for every single descriptor and when it comes to formatting, when it comes to accepted values, when it comes to column headers. So this is where you can get all this information from. And this is what we will be using in order to map your column labels to this standard. So in your own passport data, the column that, for example, that is dedicated for accession numbers might be called accession N, or might be called only number. In this file, it's called accession number with capital N. It might be, lowercase. Every gene bank has its own. What we want to do right now is to create a way to automatically map all of these, labels into the MCPD labels. It is especially relevant for you if your passport data is not all together in one Excel sheet. If you have many different sheets where your passport data is located, the next steps, creation of a mapping, or what we call a lookup table, would be very helpful for you, so that you don't have to manually rename every column in all of your sheets of passport data. I will re-enable the accessibility keyboard so that you can see my keyboard again and the shortcuts that I'm using. Okay. So I want to select all my column headers right now. That's what I will be creating a table for. So I will click on the first cell, Command, Shift, and the arrow that is pointing to the right. So again, first cell, Command, Shift, right. I want to copy, Control C, and I want to create my lookup table of column headers. So columns and MCPD. I want to put it in this sheet. So I want to paste in this sheet, but if I paste them just using Control V, I will be pasting them in a row, but I want them in a list instead. So what I do is I make sure they are copied again. I go to my new sheet, and again in home ribbon and paste, you click the arrow and you click on transpose. This would allow your data that is now, so your column names that are in one row, to become all in one list, right? So if you click on transpose, now they are in a list. And next to each item, so next to each cell, those are my original column names. I want to write the correct MCPD label. If I do this one time, I can then automate the mapping of my labels for the rest of my sheets. So you save this sheet and you use it for later. You do the manual mapping only one time in this lookup table, And then we will see later on how you can map automatically in all of your sheets. So I want to clear the formatting here. I go to Home ribbon, clear formats. And I want to label this list. I want to name it as my original, for example, here I insert another row and I add the name, my original column names. And I want this next column to be called mapped to MCPD. Right. Control A, insert a table. My table does have headers, so I make sure that this button is clicked because my table does have column names. Okay, so we're kind of repeating the previous steps. And I know this is manual right now, so you have to go to the MCPD standard, the link that I sent you in the chat, go to the PDF, and make sure that you understand every descriptor correctly in order to match it properly with your original column names. So for example, you make sure in your own data that collecting source, what does it really mean? Is it collecting source meaning the country where your accessions have been collected? Or is it the type of field? Or is it the institute that donated the material for you? So what I'm trying to say is that make sure that you understand the meaning behind your own columns, and make sure that when you read this MCPD standard that you look for the correct column or the correct descriptor in order to do the matching properly, so that you don't accidentally match something that is supposed to be accession name, so that you don't match it with accession number in your own the passport data. If you have questions so far, please let me know about the MCPD standard or about what we are doing now. Otherwise, I will continue. Okay. Right now, I'm not going to do it manually because it would have to be done like this. I check and double check that this is right. I will open a file where I already did this for this file for this sample, and to show you how it would look like. For example, here, this would be called your original column names, and their MCPD matching names would be this. Okay. I will copy this sheet and paste it in our sample. Okay. And I will show you how we can use a function called vlookup in order to, in this sheet, automatically link or transform this into this. So in order to automatically transform institute to inst code, etc. So the vlookup function in Spanish, you would be typing in, this is what you would be typing in your Excel if you are using Spanish. BUSCARV. I will wait a moment for everybody to make note of that. And in French, so in French, it's recherche. So in French, it's recherche V. So I will also wait a moment for everybody to make note of that if you use the French or Spanish Excel. Because if you type in VLOOKUP in those, it probably won't work. Okay. So this is where I have my original column names, and I want to match them here by using the VLOOKUP function. Right now, I will just demonstrate this function. And in the previous steps, so in the next parts of the webinar, we would go over it in more detail and how to integrate it with your table and how to do the same for example, different entries, not just the column name according to MCPD. But right now, let's just demonstrate this function before we end the webinar. So I want to insert, just for the sake of right now demonstration, I inserted a row above my table just to demonstrate this function. And according to your version of Excel, in my case, I will use equals v lookup. I open the parentheses, and there are 4 steps I have to apply in order for this function to return the matching MCPD label. So the first step, I want to select what exactly do I want to look for? What exactly am I, so what's the data that I want to match? So I want to match institute, right? I want to match this title here. And then I have to select where is the data, where can the data be found in order to do the matching. So that's called table array. So lookup value is what I'm going to be looking at, and table array is the range where this data can be found, the matching data can be found. So my array, my table array is in another sheet, so I click on it. Without clicking escape or without doing anything, I just click on the sheet where my data is located, and I specify to Excel both columns. So I'm saying that in this array, in this range, both my original and my match are located. You have to select the range where both the original and the match are located, because then Excel would look up lookup value and then return its match. So then I press comma, space. Now I am specifying in this range, in this table array, where is the matching value located? The matching value is located in the second column. So I press the number 2. So, and then the final thing that is optional, you don't have to specify it, but I always prefer that you do. You are telling Excel, do you find an approximation or the exact match? And in my case, I want an exact match. So I press false, and I close the parentheses. And while staying in this sheet, I press enter. So you see that this formula now has returned, this formula has returned the matching MCPD label for my original label. And all I have to do is click. So you hover over the edge of the cell where you see a green button until you get the symbol of the cross. You press So you basically are clicking and dragging. You're probably familiar with this. And for a lot of column names, for example, for taxonomy and for genus underscore original, it says not assigned, not found, because those two, taxonomy and genus underscore original, are not here in my lookup table. You don't find them here. So Excel is saying, okay, no, we didn't find anything for those two. And that's good because those two, taxonomy and genus underscore original, those two are not MCPD labels. So we don't want to map them. That's what you specify in this sheet. Every column in your own data that you want to map to MCPD, you specify for it a matching MCPD name. Here, I don't want to map those because I want to keep them as original data, and I want to map the final one to genus. Same for species original. I only map the final species. And it does the same for a lot of the other labels, like acquisition date. This is the MCPD match. Collecting source. This is the MCPD match. Biological status is SAMP stat. Status in the MLS is MLS stat. So now, because we're running like maybe more than 20 minutes over time, I will end this part here, but I will make sure to send you the invitation for the later parts of this webinar that are also going to be happening this summer. So we are going to continue with this function VLOOKUP and other lookup functions in order to not only, use it for the column names, but also for the actual data. So you're going to create your lookup tables for individual values, but also we will look at how we will be formatting all the data that is not coded. And maybe one last thing, because it popped up in the chat about the date. So I know I said we will cover formatting later, but someone asked it in the chat. So just before wrapping up, Excel has a very sensitive or special way of handling dates. Sometimes you change the format of your date column and it becomes a number. This is because Excel, the way it understands dates, it understands them as a number from the 1st of January 1900s. So for example, this date is 43,830 days after the 1st of January 1900. That is date 0 for Excel. So it's 1st of Jan 1900, if I'm not mistaken. So any other date that's after that in Excel is the number of days after this day. So we want to transform these numbers, reformat them into year, month, day. We don't want them in terms of number of days after the 1900s. So I select the first cell here, Command Shift down. I selected all my dates. And I go to the home ribbon. You will see here the number format as a drop-down menu. So we want to go to more number formats here. Okay, we want to go to a special number format, custom. We will customize it according to the number format in MCPD. So if you go to any number, to any date descriptor in MCPD, it will show you that it's supposed to look like this: year, 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 month, month, day, day. So I would exactly type this in Excel. It understands, it has different ways that you can format dates. It understands that if you click year, 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 month, month, and day, day, it understands that it's going to transform this date format from this number of days after 1900s to this format If you click on OK, now you have your date like visible as we want it in MCPD. Now you might want to change that. You might want to, have it day or like, yeah, day slash, it's already here, day slash month slash year. If you click on OK, now we changed it with slashes. Or, you can have it in many different ways, depending also on the location, in which country. They use different formatting for dates, but the one we want for MCPD is this: year, months, and dates. So this is just, we were going to cover this later, but this is just because it was in the chat. So before we wrap up, if anyone has any, urgent final question, please type it in the chat. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for joining today. I hope you found these tips useful. And for sure, we'll be sending your way the invitation for the next one, where we'll be continuing as we started. We will also make sure to share with you the recording of this webinar, and as promised, the documentation that you would be using or referring to. It's really detailed. So I will show you a sneak peek of how it looks like. In case you feel like you missed something, there's a function or a tool, you didn't really, we were not really able to apply right now. Don't worry, everything is documented in detail so that, you have it at hand. I will show you a very quick example here. So we have really like step by step. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen. And I thank you again so much for joining. I'm reading in the chat a lot of thanks. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining. Okay, we'll end the webinar. So have a great day or evening ahead, depending on where you are, and see you in the next one. Bye.